If you were to ask me what my favorite genres are, you might expect me to go on and on about classic shoot-em-ups, epic adventure games, and pretty much anything involving a fake plastic guitar. One genre that you might not expect me to say is typing game, but I've been a big fan since the early days of Typing of the Dead. That's one of the reasons that I wanted to loop back around and review Outshine, a recently released action game that is a mix of typing game and Rez with a little Amplitude mixed in for good measure. It's an addictive and often mesmerizing affair that shows you how much can be done inside of the typing genre. This is my review of Outshine. Now here's a refreshing take on both the typing and the shoot-em-up genres. Picture, if you will, a man-shaped figure made out of electricity running down a 5-lane highway full of hills and sharp corners. Instead of cars and trucks, the highway is filled with colorful robot enemies that can only be destroyed by typing the word that they're carrying. The faster that you type the word, the sooner you're going to be able to move on to the next bad guy, this one threatening to drop a bomb or laser the entire lane of the highway. This is how you play Outshine. The goal is to jump between the different lanes, dodging enemies, all while frantically typing out the words in order to shoot down the bad guys and keep the path clear. You play a character named Hugh, who escapes captivity and sets out on a revenge mission against the oppressive rulers of this futuristic world. Along the way, we learn the history of these people and how a single decision simultaneously saved and doomed them. Outshine is split up into 4 sections, with the first 3 containing 6 stages. After busting out of prison, you will need to fight the onslaught in the city, escape through the forest, and then take on the ultimate evil in the temple. We get a small taste of the story between each of the stages, building up to some epic reveals that will reshape the way you look at Hugh and his journey. Now, like I said at the top, this is a typing game that seems to be influenced by some of my favorite games. You run on what feels like a note highway from Amplitude, while at the same time shooting down enemies like Rez by using Typing of the Dead tactics. That's 3 great flavors coming together to create one of the best and most exciting typing games that I've ever played. Part of what really works about this game is that you're constantly adding new obstacles and enemies as you play through the 19-stage campaign. You'll suddenly need to type out more than 1 word to defeat a tough villain, or spell out a much longer word in order to clear a blocked path. Speaking of which, there are parts of the 5-lane highway that have been completely destroyed or blocked, and you better watch out for the single-letter walls that may look easy to kill, but can be a real inconvenience when you're trying to clear a path. The game really shines when it comes to the boss fights, especially when it comes to the main ones at the end of each world. That said, the stage bosses are no slouch either. While I was a little disappointed that they repeated a lot of the stage bosses between worlds, they were still fun to fight every single time. They do a good job of making you spell out much longer words, all while shooting bullets at you that you need to quickly knock down using your keyboard. These mini-bosses look great, and they really put your typing skills to the test, which is exactly what you're looking for from a boss, right? That said, these in-stage baddies pale in comparison to the cool main bosses that show up at the end of each world. These are massive beasts full of cool-looking technology that will reshape how you look at Outshine. One of my favorite bosses will shift the camera angle from 3D to side-scrolling in order to show us all 3 parts of its frame. You'll need to pay attention to the full screen in order to type out every word and knock down all the incoming bullets. And that's not it, because even when you defeat part of it, the boss will shift the camera back into a 3D angle where you'll have to dodge falling obstacles. The presentation is wonderful, and I absolutely loved fighting these bosses, even though I had to repeat the process a few times because I kept dying. I think it's safe to say that Outshine is the best looking typing game that I've ever played. The 4 different sections of the game all look completely different, and even the stages within the sections will evolve and open up over time. There are a lot of cool visual effects at play here, and the enemies are fun to blow up. I noticed a couple of hiccups and frame rate drops here and there, but I suspect that has more to do with my setup than the game itself. Thankfully, the majority of the game ran smoothly and never ceased to impress. Now, my only real complaint about Outshine is that the lane changing mechanics take a little getting used to. You can use either the keyboard's shift or control buttons to move left and right, which makes sense in theory, but can be a little bit tricky when a bunch of robot enemies are attacking you all at once. You'll eventually get used to it, but it never feels as natural as the typing elements. In fact, I spent the first half hour instinctively reaching for the arrow keys to move my character around, but that never worked. The other problem that I ran into is that I would occasionally need to press the shift button enough times to trigger a Windows pop-up. Apparently, if you hammer the shift button enough times, Windows will ask you if you want to change the sticky key options, which I didn't even know about. This ends up pausing the game, and it sends you scrambling to get rid of that pop-up box. I suppose the good news is that you don't get that if you choose to use the control buttons, but I found that a little bit harder to reliably hit. Look, this may be one of those issues where your mileage may vary. Thankfully, Outshine gets pretty much everything else right. The game's going to take you a few hours to beat, and you'll definitely want to go through it more than once on some of the higher difficulties. What's more, you can add some extra modifiers that'll make the game a little bit more challenging and compete with the competitive leaderboard. Couple that with the great music and action-packed gameplay, and you have a real winner that fans of typing games should not miss. Outshine is an intoxicating mix of Rez and Typing of the Dead with a little Amplitude sprinkled in for good measure. It's a fast-paced shooter that looks great and elevates the typing genre beyond the usual cliches. The gameplay takes a little getting used to, and slamming that shift button too many times will definitely annoy Windows, but once you get into the swing of things, you'll find that Outshine is a tough game to put down. This is the best typing game that I've played in a long time. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite typing game? Look, I know I reference Typing of the Dead a lot, but there have been some really good ones lately. I enjoyed that text assist game a couple of years ago, despite some flaws. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back on Friday with a look at Next Generation's 5-star reviews, followed by more reviews and even some Christmas programming next week. Lots of fun stuff coming up, so do me a favor and click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.